It's a beautiful thing in poker when a plan comes together, and that's exactly what might happen for Mustafa Kanit in this big-time hand in a 25K high roller.
Yeah, we're four-handed here at the EPT Dublin event, and as Grant said, it's 25K high roller. They're already in the money, but there's still big money jumps. And an important thing to remember throughout this hand is Chance Kornuth is in fourth place, and he only has 11 big blinds, while second and third place guys have 42 and 45 each, and Mustafa Kanit, who is the chip leader with 75 blinds.
Right, and Mustafa's plan is extremely ambitious. It's going to be difficult to pull off, but it's definitely cool.
Yeah, for sure. This hand was suggested to us on Twitter by a whole bunch of people, even though it was only 4 days ago. Check it out. If you have a suggestion for the breakdown, tweet it at us and include a link to the YouTube video.
Bertelsen with queens. Raises the button. Queen 9 suited for Mustafa Kanit. And his timing may be a little bit off here. He attempts to 3-bet from the small. Is this always a spot where you should 4-bet queens? Is it ever an argument for flatting and playing in position?
Do you know, I've got nothing but bad stories to tell about a time I tried to flat. I think you've always got to just try and get as much value in here, haven't you?
There is the fourth bet. Bertelsen's made it just shy of 1.2 million. And Kanit does not appear to be done with this. That looks like a call. So Mustafa Kanit calls a 4-bet out of position with Queen 9 of diamonds. I assume he has a plan. Maybe.
Maybe. Well, I mean,
the plan is to rep the ace and get Bertelsen off queens.
It's there for the taking. I mean, it seems like, excuse me, an arrogant move to suggest, well, I'm just going to call this clear push of strength and then just hope a big card comes down and rep it. But if he did it now, how much would you hate life if you're Bertelsen? So it's there for the taking if you have the cojones.
2.5 million in the middle. Bertelsen with 3 million behind. Is this a must-bet spot? Can you imagine if Kanit now pulled the trigger and check raise bluffed?
I mean, he's the boss.
Instead, Kanit just flats the 700,000, floating out of position.
You might be thinking a lot of what Mustafa Kanit is doing right now looks crazy and bad, and you're probably right. But there are some reasons why it could work, and it's definitely a really cool play. Part of why it could work, and something they don't mention in the broadcast, is that Chance Kornuth is sitting there in fourth place with 11 big blinds, and he is very likely to be the next guy out. And Bertelsen really doesn't want to be that guy, and Kanit knows that.
Yeah, there's an extreme real life money difference right now, potentially, for Bertelsen if he ends up going out in this hand. It's going to cost him at least 60,000 euro, maybe a lot more, if he goes out here. So that's always going to be in the back of his head, and that's why I think that informs Kanit's 3-bet on the flop, pre-flop as well, right? I mean,
right,
that's what's going on.
So when Kanit 3-bets pre-flop, it's simply because, well, first of all, it's positional. It's button versus small blind, but also because he knows that Bertelsen is afraid to go out in fourth. He doesn't want to get in this huge pre-flop war unless he has a premium hand.
Right, like Bertelsen might be opening lots of hands like ace-9 off and things like very reasonable hands to open with on the button, but then feel like he just has to fold rather than get into a big war with, right? So 3-betting a hand like Queen-9 suited in this spot makes all the sense in the world when Kornuth has 11 blinds. It's not a bad 3-bet anyway, but especially when Kornuth has 11
Yeah,
blinds.
it makes plenty of sense. So Then we have the 4-bet, which
Yes.
John Duthie says is mandatory, but we kind of think that
Nah.
there are two really good ways to play queens in this spot. One is to 4-bet to a small size like Bertelsen did.
Yep.
We like that. Another is to flat. Flatting is fine here because you want to keep your flatting range wide enough that you can sometimes have premium hands.
Absolutely, and especially because of the stack to pot ratio that's already being, created with this pot. It's really fine, especially also with Knit being the reputation of being sort of a crazy person.
Yeah, you want to let him bluff later on.
And that's not crazy like, he's going to rip his clothes off and pee everywhere. It's just like, he's a crazy he's got a bit of a maniac poker reputation, right?
Yeah.
That you want to give him a chance to maybe put more chips in the pot.
Yeah, so he 4-bets, and this is where Knit gets ambitious. This is where usually people are just going to fold.
Yeah.
But Knit decides he is going to win the hand somehow.
Yep.
And it might be as simple as, I'm getting a good price right now. My hand can flop well. Maybe I can sniff something out later and win without making a hand. I'm going to call this 4-bet out of position.
Also, I've got a lot of chips. I'm the chip leader. I can afford this. It's okay if I just have to fold on the flop. And I got to believe Mustafa's got to think that he's got a very good read on Bertelsen.
Yeah, he has to have a good read, and he has to know that ICM is a big factor for Bertelsen.
Yeah.
And that he thinks that Bertelsen will fold more often due to chance corn this short stack.
Right. And so we get this flop, which is a terrible flop.
For queens,
in
it's
this
a really
spot.
bad flop, and the first thing we need to talk about on the flop is, should Bertelsen be betting?
Right.
James Hardigan asks if this is a mandatory bet spot.
I think it's clearly not.
No, it is not.
In fact, I think this is almost a mandatory check spot.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Like,
in
what
this
are we
spot.
hoping? What are we hoping is going to happen? What good things are going to happen when we bet queens here? We're going to get called by what exactly? Maybe some pocket pairs, but not very many. Jacks usually aren't going to be here because jacks will probably have 5-bet all in already. Pre-flop, right? So we're hoping to get called by 2-9 sometimes, I guess.
We're hoping that Knit has a pair and he decides to call once, I
Right.
guess. But that's not really what Bertelsen is hoping. Bertelsen just wants
Right.
Knit to fold and the hand to be over.
For
He's
sure.
like, this flop is bad. I hope this hand ends now.
Let's define this by you going away, please.
Right. And he bets a very small amount, and we like the amount.
Yeah,
The
I think
amount
it's a
is
good size.
And not because he has queens, but because we think on a board so dry and so polarized, a small amount is going to get the job done a perfect amount of the time, and it's also going to sometimes induce when Bertelsen has a hand he's going to go with, like ace-king.
I mean, in theory, how can Mustafa call with anything that isn't an ace or an 8 here? He just
Right.
shouldn't be able to call anything at all, right?
So
Which
that's
is why
a problem.
it's a bad bet.
Right, because Bertelsen, in theory, is folding out all worse hands and getting called by all better hands.
Now, it turns out that isn't what happens here
No.
because Knit just decides, I think I can win this
all
pot.
right, so now we need to talk about why Knit is calling.
Okay.
And let's be really clear right away. This is a very ambitious play.
Ambitious is not a compliment.
It's not
by the way.
necessarily going to work too often. This works a lot more often if stacks are deeper, but
Yeah.
stacks are so short. Stack to pot ratio was already about 1-to-1 before Bertelsen bet.
Yeah.
So things are getting really precarious for Knit here. But we're going to talk about it in combos right now, okay? So pre-flop, when Bertelsen 4-bets, we're going to assume, and this is definitely an assumption, but with chance corner stack the way it is, Bertelsen's probably not even 4-betting ace-queen because he doesn't want to get it in with ace-queen, and he also doesn't want to 4-bet fold ace-queen.
Sure.
Both of those seem like disasters, right?
Seems reasonable.
So the only ace in Bertelsen's range is ace-king.
Right.
Or pocket aces, I guess.
Right. And sometimes weird blocker plays that are really bluffs.
But those are really rare due to the ICM situation.
Agreed.
Knit is much more likely to have a blocker than he is.
No doubt.
All right, so ace-king has 16 combos.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the pocket aces combos, which there are 3 of.
Yep.
But that we're not really going to be worried about those too much. So that's 19 combos total. Other things Bertelsen will be 4-betting with preflop are probably 9s through kings. That seems like a
Sure.
reasonable range, right?
Yep.
And there's 30 combos of those.
Yep.
And then he has his other random bluffs, which it seems rare that he would be 4-betting something like king-queen suited when it can flop so well and he can just call. But maybe we'll give him like half a combo of that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You can give
Yeah.
him some. You can
So-
give him a combo or two of that. I mean, the other thing is this: once the flop actually comes out, right, and we're keeping that range going. Well, now there's an ace on the flop, which of course means the aces now are beating you. The ace kings of the world are beating you. But there's also now 12 combos of ace king
Right, of
that
course.
exist, and there's still the 30 combos of 9s through kings.
Yeah, so that is less than half the combos of hands that Bertelsen is actually happy with this flop.
Yeah.
So Knit decides Bertelsen is so pair heavy here, I can rep an ace so much better than him. So you would think if Knit wants to win this hand, he's going to want to check shove and just end it here. But Knit wants to make it look like he truly has an ace. He wants to play this correctly, like he would play something like ace 10 or ace jack suited, which he would have probably played the same way pre-flop.
Yeah.
And when he check calls here, it looks a lot like one of those hands.
How does he not have ace 10 suited? I can't even imagine. If I'm sitting there in Bertelson's shoes, I 100% think he's got ace 10.
Yeah, it seems exactly like ace 10 up to ace queen, basically. Yeah. And it's just a crappy spot for Bertelson. And Knit is genuinely doing a good job of repping an ace so far. It's just a bit ambitious in a spot where the stack to pot ratio is so precarious.
Agreed.
I would love to hear the inner thoughts right now of Anton, because if he's going, okay, so he raised, he re-raised me, and now he's flatted. I mean, how on earth do you vaguely work out?
Canet is now officially drawing dead. He checks it to Bertelson, who has less than pot behind.
The thing is, he's drawing dead, but for some reason it feels like the player most likely to win this encounter, depending on how hard he plays this now.
I'm not surprised to see Bertelson check behind. A jack on the river changes nothing.
I'm excited to see what he does here. This gets through.
Oh, Bertelson is hating life right now.
Yeah, it's a perfect plan. I mean, it's not anything that any normal players are going to get to quite soon, but these guys are beyond us.
1.75 million, which is most of Bertelson's stack.
I mean, if Bertelson folds here, I don't want to be around in 45 minutes because there's going to be some vomiting on the streets of Dublin. Again. Oh, man.
If he folds this, Canet is going to take an overwhelming chip lead. Bertelson will be left with around 20 big blinds.
Scott Campbell saying this hand is the main reason we should have a cards up coverage. It is a treat to come in to this, to pick up the high roller on our first day of broadcast with cards up, to see this kind of action.
Bertelson looking back at his hand and he folds it!
Oh my lord. Doesn't show. I think that's perfect. What a fantastic hand.
And the plan comes to fruition. This was clearly what Mustafa was planning on the flop, and he got it to work pretty much exactly as he was hoping it would go.
Right, so that's the thing. As he was hoping it would go. It works because everything came together the way that Mustafa wanted it to, but I don't think it's going to come together often enough with stack to pot ratio being as it is for this to be a profitable play over time. That being said, it's super cool. Oh, it's so cool.
The Fonz of poker hands for sure. Now, there's an interesting thing which happens too where Bertelson checks back the turn, as I think he absolutely has to.
Right. And Bertelson should be checking with ace-king also probably most of the time to induce bluffs like this from Knit on the river, which he can snap call.
Also, Knit might even decide to fold a hand as strong as ace-10 on the turn if Bertelson 4-bets bets the flop and then moves in on the turn. He is going to at least think about it. I don't know if he's actually going to fold.
That's true, but I don't think Bertelson should be moving in as a bluff on the turn.
I agree.
That's a bad move.
No, I don't think you should be trying to get him off, but I'm saying this so you'd be checking back ace-king sometimes on the turn. So you can show up with ace-king here on the river.
Right, but maybe Mustafa knows that Bertelson isn't doing that with ace-king very often because that would help him make this play.
Yeah, maybe. The other thing, too, is Mustafa decides an interesting size, right? He goes 1.75 million. And I think I like that he doesn't move him in because there's no real reason to move Bertelson in versus making it 1.75.
Yeah, he saves 4 blinds when he gets called.
I like that a lot. It looks super strong. Looks like it
looks really strong.
I actually wonder if he could make it even cheaper and achieve the same effect, like 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. Probably is going to have almost the exact same amount of fold equity, I would think.
Yeah, you would think.
But it's pretty sweet. It's a sweet play. Because the stack to pot to ratio is so small all the way throughout this hand, I don't know if this is really going to work long term as a play to make in these spots, but it sure worked this time.
Of course, we're talking about the ICM consideration earlier, and that's going to be a big factor as to why this might work. Bertelson's a lot less likely to hero when Chance Kornuth is sitting there with 11 blinds.
For sure.
And going back to the combos we talked about on the flop, Knit knows now that it's more likely that Bertelsen is pair heavy once Bertelsen checks back the turn, because sometimes Bertelsen is going to move his aces in on the turn.
Right, and he's almost never going to move into showdownable hands on the turn.
Right, of course not. And Knit, as we said, did a really good job of repping ace 10 or ace jack, something like that.
I mean,
he
100%.
has ace 10 through ace queen. It feels like every time when he bets the river here, having check called the flop, it is truly a beautiful representation of that type of hand. And I think it's a really cool, well thought out play. It's just a bit too ambitious for the stack to pot ratio.
I mean, usually it would be. It wasn't this time.
I guess it worked.
Don't go anywhere, because after this, we're going to look at comments from last week's video.
If you guys want to see another really cool river bluff, check out Who Can Have the Nuts by clicking here.
This is a very cool play.
I actually said it was my favorite hand of 2015.
That's right. So if you care about that at all, also check out our podcast and make sure you subscribe.
Last week, we had a really huge cash game pot between Matt Kirk, Phil Ivey, and Antonio Sfondiari. Aussie Matt, or Matt Kirk, is a maniac.
Yes.
And it was titled, Can the Maniac Bluff Antonio Sfondiari? Turned out he couldn't. It was a difficult thing to do, especially due to his image, and Antonio made some good reads and a good call.
Yeah, it's a great hand and really interesting, but let's hear what you folks had to say. So Jeff Mollum on YouTube says, doesn't matter how Kirk sizes his bets in this hand, his bluff frequency is so high that any price he lays as Sfondiari is going to be too good of a price for folding to be correct. Even if he shoves on the river, he'd have to be bluffing less than 40% of the time to fold, which simply isn't true.
You know, that's a really good point by Jeff. I think he's right that usually Esfandiari is going to end up calling anyway just due to Kirk's image. But we have to say, Kirk has a little bit better chance of winning the hand if he sizes it bigger. He's got to have at least a little bit better chance.
What he does is he raises on the flop and makes it 45K, bets 50K on the turn and 100 on the river when he's got a lot behind, so he's got several 100,000 behind, like 2 or 3. He should bet much bigger on the turn, like 90 to 100, and give himself a chance to either shove the river or bet so much that Antonio at least has to consider folding.
Right.
Antonio does sit there for a while and think about it, but we think he's really ultimately always calling. He's just sort of like making sure.
And he got to say some cool stuff on the camera. I think that's kind of Antonio's thing.
Dealer, what do you think? Should I pay him? Sometimes you got to pay him. Yeah. All right. Next up, Mehmet Bilgin on YouTube says, wouldn't Kirk also be repping aces and kings along with deuces and pocket eights on the flop, effectively merging the top end of his medium hands into his polarized range?
Probably not. That's what we're going to go with.
Yeah.
I mean, the first problem with that, which this is a longer comment actually, and later he does bring it up to his credit, that usually Kirk's going to be 3-betting aces or kings pre-flop pretty much all the time, considering his maniacal image that he is aware of.
Right. I mean, the thing is this. When you're a crazy person and everyone knows you're a crazy person, then you always bet your strong hand strong because you've got so many other hands you're betting strong too. That's how you balance. You play your strong hand super strong. So there's no reason at all for Kirk to ever slow play pretty much anything. As we see, if he had trip deuces here, he was going to get paid by Antonio.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, finally, on Reddit, Gusty Bible says, if Kirk did have a deuce here, would he get more money by playing the way he did or by just calling Antonio's flop raise?
Well, it seems pretty clear that he would get more money by playing the way he did because Antonio called all 3 streets and the pot was much bigger due to the play that he played, So I don't see any other way that he could get more money by just calling.
Yeah, I think actually if he's check raising on turn or river, it's hard. If he does have a deuce, he's going to be afraid it's going to scare off Antonio because it's such a strong play. Now, maybe his image is so strong and so crazy, it almost doesn't matter how he plays it. He can just get chips in whenever. But I think this is a really good play for Matt Kirk specifically to play a deuce because of what Grant said. His image is just crazy.
The only way he could get more value is if he sized it bigger.
Right.
And the thing is, Antonio knows that, which is why he should size it bigger when he's also bluffing.
Right. He should be sizing big either way, make it much tougher on Antonio. Although, again, it probably wouldn't have mattered, honestly.
Right. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week.